Before we find the way forward, we must first learn to recognize the whisper behind us. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." Isaiah 30, verse 21. Welcome back, dear friend. Today, too, of the journey back to the Father. If you're here again, it means you're hungry, not just for words, but for something deeper, for healing, for clarity, for a voice that can still reach you in the silence. Today's message is titled "The Voice in the Wilderness," and it's a powerful reminder that even in the driest, most confusing seasons of life, God is still speaking. You may feel lost, overlooked, or unsure, but what if the wilderness isn't where God is silent? It's where he whispers. In just a moment, we'll walk with Eliab as he discovers that silence does not mean absence, and that the stillness he feared might just become sacred ground. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe and click the bell icon so you don't miss any part of this journey. Every day builds on the last, and the Father is calling you, one step, one whisper, one moment at a time. So let's step into the wilderness together and listen. The wilderness had become Eliab's companion. It had been days since he left the village. The bread was gone, the water scarce, and yet the hunger in his soul outmatched anything his body could feel. He wasn't just lost in the land, he was lost in himself. He had thought silence would bring clarity. Instead, it had become deafening. Eliab's feet ached, but his heart throbbed more. Still, something was shifting. Yesterday, under the sycamore tree, a psalm had returned to him, not by memory alone, but by grace. He hadn't prayed it. It had found him. Today, he walked slower, not from weakness, but awareness. He began to wonder, was someone walking with him? Could it be true, what the scriptures say, that God does not just wait at the finish line, but travels beside us in the wandering? Isaiah 30, 21 speaks of a voice, one behind us, not ahead. Not barking orders, not dragging us forward, but whispering gently into our choices. This is the way. Walk in it. Eliab had always imagined God's voice as thunder, a prophet's shout, a trumpet of warning. But what if the voice of God could also be a whisper? He thought back to stories from his childhood. The prophet Elijah, trembling in a cave, not finding God in the wind, or fire, or earthquake, but in a still, small voice. That voice didn't come to terrify, it came to guide. And now, in the wilderness, Eliab began to hear something faint, not with his ears, but with his soul. It was not a sentence, it wasn't a command. It was the quiet certainty that he was not alone, a knowing that someone else's footsteps had walked this road before. The wilderness is not just a place of loss. Biblically, it is also a place of voice. It was in the wilderness that Moses heard the call of God through a burning bush. It was in the wilderness where Israel learned to depend on daily manna. It was in the wilderness that John the Baptist prepared hearts for the coming Messiah. And it is often in our wilderness, when everything familiar has fallen away, when noise no longer satisfies, when strength runs out, that we finally make room for the whisper. This is where Eliab found himself. And perhaps this is where you are too. Have you felt surrounded by silence lately? Have your prayers felt like echoes? Does it seem like your heart is wandering through dry land? You are not being punished. You may be being prepared. God is not absent in your wilderness. He is present in a different way, not loud, not obvious, but near, in the whisper. The enemy will shout with accusation, but God, he whispers direction. This is the way, not you better get it right, but I'll help you walk it. This verse from Isaiah was spoken to a people who had veered off course, who had made alliances with Egypt and not God. But still, God said, "You will hear my voice again." Restoration doesn't begin with loud changes. It begins with a heart that begins to listen again. Eliab didn't know where the road led, but now he walked with a subtle courage, because he wasn't trusting the path. He was trusting the whisper. And maybe that's where you begin again too. Not with answers, not with a 5-step plan, but with ears tuned towards heaven, with the courage to pause and say, "Speak, Lord." You don't have to fix everything today, just listen. He's still speaking in your wilderness, and his voice will not lead you into shame. It will lead you home. Eliab paused at the edge of a small ridge overlooking a dry ravine. The air was still, and though the sun was climbing higher in the sky, a soft wind passed through the brush, gently brushing his face. It reminded him of something, no, someone he hadn't felt in a long time. Not a memory, a presence. He sat down on a flat rock beneath a thorny acacia and tried to focus, not on his failures, not on the ache in his body, but on the silence. Not every silence is empty. Some silences are sacred. It was in a place like this that Moses heard the call of God. Not in the palace, not in the crowd, in the wilderness. Eliab had nothing left to offer, no strength, no plan, no purpose. Yet in this place of nothing, something stirred. A longing, a sensitivity to something he had hardened himself against for too long. He whispered, "Lord, are you still speaking?" And he remembered Isaiah's words. Your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." A voice behind you, not shouting from the future, not commanding from above, but gently, patiently guiding from behind, like a shepherd nudging his sheep, like a father watching his child stumble but not intervening too soon, just enough to steer. Eliab had imagined God had left him behind, but what if the truth was this? God had never walked ahead of him, but stayed behind him, close, protective, never forcing, always guiding. It reminded him of something his father used to do when he was young. When they walked together through the crowded markets of Jerusalem, his father wouldn't always walk beside him. Sometimes he'd walk just behind, letting Eliab choose his pace, but always close enough to step in if he veered too far. He never raised his voice. He never pulled him by the arm. He'd whisper just loud enough, "Stay left," or "Keep going straight." That's what Isaiah 30:21 is saying. God whispers, not to control you, but to guide you with love. Eliab realized something profound. The wilderness hadn't been punishment. It had been positioning. The silence had cleared space for him to finally hear. How many times had he drowned God's voice with noise, with the loud opinions of others, with his own inner critic, with distractions disguised as duties? He had filled every space with something, anything, so he wouldn't have to listen to what his soul already knew. He had left the path, but the voice had not left him. The wilderness becomes sacred when we realize it's not the absence of God, it's the removal of everything else that competes with him. Maybe that's where you are too. Maybe you're walking through a spiritual wilderness, dry, quiet, confusing. You're praying but hearing nothing, reading but feeling nothing, searching but finding nothing. Let me encourage you. God hasn't stopped speaking. He's just whispering. And whispers require us to slow down, to lean in, to become still enough to listen. Perhaps he's not answering the way you expected because he's teaching you how to recognize his voice again, not just in sermons, not just in signs, but in your own soul. Sometimes we expect God to part seas again, to shake mountains, to send angels. But most days, he sends the wind through the trees. He places a verse gently on our hearts. He brings someone to mind. He nudges. He whispers. That's why intimacy with God grows not in noise, but in stillness. Eliab rose slowly from the rock and began walking again. He still didn't know the next destination. There was no map, no sudden miracle, no glowing sign. But he walked differently now. Before, he walked to escape. Now, he walked to follow. He didn't know where the road led, but he had decided something far more important. He would keep listening. Because sometimes, before God gives us a breakthrough, he teaches us how to hear again. That's where Eliab was. And that's where we meet God. Not when we finally arrive, but when we finally listen. Abba, Father, I come before you in the wilderness of my heart. Not because I've figured it all out, but because I don't want to keep walking without hearing you. Lord, the silence has felt long. There are moments I've wondered if you're still speaking, if I've disqualified myself from your voice, if I've missed the moment. But your word says that you whisper even to those who wander. You speak to the lost. You guide the weary. You don't wait for perfect conditions. You meet us in the mess. Today, I ask you to help me quiet the noise inside, the voice of guilt that tells me I've gone too far, the voice of fear that says I'll never find my way back, the voice of doubt that questions your nearness. Let me hear your voice again, Lord, not through thunder or fire, but through stillness, through peace that makes no sense, through conviction that draws, not condemns. Speak into the dry places of my soul. Show me how to walk again, one step at a time, not rushed, not out of fear, but with a heart anchored in your guidance. I open my ears to you again, Father. Even if your voice is quiet, I will lean in. Even if the way is unclear, I will follow your leading. Not because I'm strong, but because I trust that you are. You said in your word, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." So I ask, whisper to me, Lord. I am listening. Correct me gently. Lead me kindly. And walk with me patiently. Help me to discern the difference between your voice and the noise of the world, between my own thoughts and your truth, between condemnation and conviction. Let me not rush ahead. Let me not fall behind, but let me walk in step with your whisper. I pray for those today, like me, who feel lost in the wilderness. Remind them, Lord, that the wilderness is not the end. It is often the beginning of hearing you again, of learning trust, of unlearning lies, of coming closer to the God who never stops speaking. Thank you that your voice does not shame, it restores. Thank you that you still speak. Even in my silence, you are present. Even when I stray, you are near. Even now, you are whispering, "This is the way, walk in it." And Lord, I will. By your grace, with your strength, guided by your whisper, I will walk again. Amen. Thank you for joining me for day 2 of the journey back to the Father. If today's message spoke to you, I encourage you, pause today, just once, still your soul, tune your heart, and listen. You'll be surprised where his whisper leads. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We are only beginning this story of grace. Tomorrow, in day 3, the road of repentance, Eliab comes face to face with the weight of his past and the mercy of God. You don't want to miss it. Until then, walk slowly, listen deeply. The whisper is real, and it's calling you home.